and I want to let you guys know that this meeting is being recorded. So now that that's done, welcome everybody. I'm so happy to have you guys here for today's online Python session, and I'd just like to let you guys know that this class is brought to you by Strategic Minds Foundation. My name is Arnav Doshi, and just some rules for the class. Please raise your hand if you want to speak, and I'll give you a chance to talk. Use your real name when joining the class. Be respectful to everybody, because kind words and listening ears make a great learning space. And please be respectful of everyone's time by staying focused and ready to learn, and keep the chat related to the topic so we can all stay on track and get the most out of our time together. So now let's jump into it. Um, can you guys all see my screen? Okay. So just a quick recap from our last class on Tuesday. Um, so we talked about lists, and lists are basically a collection of values. And similar to strings, lists have like their indexes. So it's like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, because computers start counting from 0. And then at every index you can just like store a separate type of value, a separate value. So in this case, it's 3, 4, 6, 10, 8. And the way that you make a list in Python is you put the name of your list, which in this case is my list. You put an equal to sign, you put square brackets, and then you put all the elements that you want to put in the list, except you separate it with a comma. And then some functions that lists can do are insert, which is basically inserting a value at an index, which is what the index and value parameters are. You can remove a specific value. You can remove, so the pop function allows you to remove a value at the specified index. And it also gives you the value that you remove. The index function tells you the index of the value in the list. So for example, in this list over here, my list, if you were to do my list dot index of 3, then you would get 0, because the 0th index is 3 and 3 is at the 0th index. The clear function clears the list, and the sort functions, they sort the list in ascending order. And if you want it to be in descending order, what you do is inside of the sort, you add a parameter. Reverse is equal to true, and the T has to be capital. So that sorts it in descending order. So with words and letters, it's ascending order is like dictionary order, and like descending order is like reverse dictionary order. Does anyone have any questions on this, or is it all clear? Okay. Can I repeat sort? Okay. Yes. So basically, the way that the sort function works is that in this case, if we had my list, right? The way that you'd like do it, you do my list dot sort, and then what would happen is that it would modify the list so that everything in all numbers in the list are sorted. So in this case, if you were to call my list dot sort, then you would get 3, 4, 6, 8, 10 would be the new list for my list. And if you were to do sort with so if you were to do, okay, it makes sense, okay. And then you understand the reverse. You understand like how it works for the reverse. They would just do the same thing for, yeah, okay, that's great. So something else that we covered is tuples, which are basically lists, except you can't do anything to them. That first word over there says read only. It's just a typo. There's no space between the read and the only. It's meant to be read only. And what read only means is that you can't change it. So once you create the tuple, it's like set in stone. You can't do anything to it. And the way that you create a tuple is you basically do the same thing as a list, except instead of using square brackets, use parentheses. And then we also talked about user-defined functions, which are basically functions that you can create on your own. And you use this def statement where you do def function name, and then you can have a parameter or however many parameters you want to have, and then you can have a return statement if you want to return a value. So for example, if someone like calls the function and you want like to store the output of the function in a variable, then that's when you use a return, because like when you evaluate the function reduces to what is returned. And then we have an example function here on the right, and its function name and then the parameter is cube. So what it does, it returns the cube of the parameter. So what this will print out is it will print out top and then 3 cubed, which is 27, and then bottom. And 3 cubed is just 3 raised to the power of 3. And then we talked about powers when we were talking about math. And for return values, it's like important to know that by default, the function does not print the output. By default, if you have a return statement, by default it will return it. And if you want to actually print what's being outputted by the function, then you want to use a print statement. Now, if statements. So we started talking about if statements, but we didn't really get all the way. And if statements, they're basically how you use if, and then use a Boolean condition. And if the Boolean condition is true, then the statements below the colon that are indented will be executed. But if it's false, and if there's an elif, which is short for else if, then it will move on to the elif, and it will evaluate this Boolean condition. And then if that's true, it will evaluate all of these indented lines below the colon. And if it's not true, then it'll move on to the else, and it will evaluate all the indented lines after the colon. And then we also talked about comparison operators, like equal to, not equal to, greater than, less than. And those are basically ways for you to compare two things, like 5 is less than 10, and you can get a Boolean value from that. So yeah, is it all clear? Okay. Robert, does it make sense? Okay. Yeah, both of you guys should just keep reacting or just messaging in the chat, so I know that I'm making sense to both of you guys. So something else that we can use in if statements are logical operators, like and, or, and not. And they're actually quite simple just from their meaning. So what the and logical operator does is that it checks if two conditions are both true. So for example, this is condition, or one second. This left one is condition 1, and the right one is condition 2. And we know that 5 is less than 10, so that's true. And we know that 13 is greater than 2, so that's true. So true and true always evaluates to true, and no other combination evaluates to true. Because in the and logical operator, both Boolean conditions involved, they have to be true. Now in the or logical operator, there's also two conditions involved, and unlike the and, the or condition is true when one of them is true, right? So like it's like 5 or 7, so it's like true or false is true. False or true is also true. True or true is also true, but false and false is false because there's no true at all. So if you see a true at all in an or condition, then that's how you know it's true. So if you look at this example, then we can see that 5 is less than 10. That's true. And then since we already see that one of them is true, we don't even have to check the second one to know if it's true. And we can say that this entire condition with the or evaluates to true. And then the not logical operator, it just reverses the Boolean value. So for example, if we have if not 5 is less than 10, 5 is less than 10, that's a true statement. So we're basically saying if not true, and not true just means reversing it. And since there's only two Boolean values, if it's not true, then it's false. And if false is never gonna be, it's never the statement under an if false condition will never be like executed. So that's why it says it will never go through. And similarly, if you had like not 10 is less than 5, then that would be evaluated as true because 10 is less than 5 is false, and the opposite of false is true. Do logical operators make sense? And like using them in if statements? So not switches the value. Yeah, it like turns true into false and then false into true. Yeah, yeah, like that, yeah. Okay, that's great. So let's see some examples on how we can use logical operators, right? So, um, oh, these are comparison operators. Oops. Okay. So let's see some examples on how we can use comparison operators. So, one sec. Yeah, this is a code segment here, and we set a value a is equal to 30 and b is equal to 40. Excuse me. And then we check if a is greater than b, which in this case 30 is not greater than 40. So since 30 is not greater than 40, we know that this condition evaluates to false. And since it's false, it'll go to the else section, and it will print that b is greater than a. So does that like make sense? Why it would print like b is greater than a and not a is greater than b? Or yeah, a greater than b. Okay. So let's see how this would work in like code. So this is this one, I think. Let's see. Yeah, this is the one right here. And if I was to put 50 and 40, what do you guys think would be printed? You guys can just like message in the chat what you guys think would be printed. A greater than B. Okay. Robert, what do you think? A greater than B. So yeah, it prints A greater than B because 50 is greater than 40 is true, and then it will go in and execute all the indented lines, which in this case is just A greater than B. And if I run the code, then we'll see that. So actually it won't print 50 greater than 40. And the thing is that over here, we have a string, right? We have a string. And since we have the name, we have the variable name A inside of the string, it will literally print A. But if you wanted to print like 50 is greater than 40, then what we have to do is we have to change this to, we have to turn A into a string first of all, because A is currently a number. Then we have to add it to this string, and then we have to do the same thing for B. So we have string of B. And this will print 50 is greater than 40. Shouldn't I say elif B greater than A? I should do that, yeah. Good catch. Good catch. I should, okay, so someone said that shouldn't I say elif B greater than A and then put else for B equal to A? So yeah, I should do that. And I'll do that right now. B greater than A, and I'll do it else int B equal to A. But Robert, do you get why it doesn't print 50 greater than 40 and why it prints A greater than B? Okay. So let's now see how we can use logical operators, because those are comparison operators. Oh, these are more logical operators. Okay. These are more comparison operators. Oops, sorry. So similarly, we have A is 30 and B is 40. Now over here we check if A is greater than 50, and then we print A is greater than 50 if it is. We check if A is not greater than 50, because we have else if, right? Then we check if B is less than 20, and then we'll print B is less than 20. And if that doesn't happen, then we'll print no condition satisfied. So what do you guys think would be the output of this code? No condition satisfied. Okay. Someone says no condition satisfied. And what's your name? Is your name Munira, or is it like someone else's name? No, it's Ariz. Okay. Am I pronouncing it right? Ariz? Or okay. So Ariz says no condition satisfied. Robert, do you want to say something, or you're not sure? Okay, so it is no condition satisfied. So yeah, Ariz, you're right. Good job. And this is because if we just check 30 is greater than 50, that's false. So it doesn't go in and print A is greater than 50. If we were to check 40 is less than 20, that's also false. So it doesn't print B is less than 20. And then it goes to the else and it prints no condition satisfied. So just to see how this will work in code, if I were to run the code, then it would print no condition satisfied. Does anyone have any questions on this? And if not, you guys can say, no, we don't have questions. Okay, that also works, Aries. Alright, so let's see what's next, right? So this is an exercise. And basically what you guys have to do is, or what I'd recommend you guys to do, is that you guys should write a program which accepts two integers, right? Just like normal integers, and print the greater number of the two. And you should try to do it by calling a function to return which number is greater. So I'll give you guys like around 5 minutes to do this, and if you guys have any questions like on how you should do it, you guys can ask me, and then after the 5 minute, well, like during the 5 minutes if you want, and then after the 5 minutes I'll talk about the solutions, and then if you guys have any questions on that, you guys can just ask those questions. Yeah. Okay, it's good to know that you're done. Always. I'll wait until 10:30 or until Robert says that he's done, and then whichever comes first, and then I'll explain the solution. Oh, Robert, you're also done? Okay. So let's talk about the solution. So I call usually in Python you want to define your functions at the top, and I tried moving it around to the bottom with Google Colab, and what I found out was that it gives me like a warning sign, but it doesn't really do anything. So what I think that means is that it's okay if you put your function at the bottom for Google Colab, but for like but just for like good practice, I would recommend putting your functions at the top of your code because sometimes like if you run it on your computer or if you're using some separate online IDE, then maybe it's not as lenient as Google Colab. So I'd recommend putting your functions at the top of your code. So I made a function, greater number, which basically just chooses the greater number between x and y. And this time we don't need an equal to clause because if x is equal to y, then it will just return y and it's okay. And and then for the numbers, I just use an input to get the first number and the second number, and then I set the greater number, the output of the greater number function to be my answer. And this is like kind of like how the return statement works in functions. So for like return a value, then you can like set a variable equal to that value, and you can use that variable throughout your code. And then I just print the answer. The greater number of the two is whatever. So with this code, I want you guys to like try and predict the output. If I was to input 2 as my first number and 1 as my second number, what do you guys think? What do you guys think the code would print? For x and y, why does it work? Okay, yeah. So that's actually a really good question. Um, so when we're defining functions, right, I'm gonna pause the code for now, and then I'm just gonna clear the output. So when we're defining functions, um, you can use parameters, right? And for this function is a separate block of code on its own. It is independent of anything that comes below it, anything that comes above it, right? And in your question, x and y are just like placeholder values. So what I have is that I have the name of my function over here, and then inside of the parentheses, I have the parameters, right? And in this case, my parameters are x and y, and throughout the function, anytime I refer to x and y, it's just referring to, well, x is referring to the first value in that parentheses, and y is referring to the second value. So over here, when I put in a and b, I'm saying a is the first value and b is the second value. And over here, I'm saying x is the first value, so and y is the second value. So in this case, whenever you're using functions, you don't want to use like the variables that you're gonna actually use in your code. You can just put like placeholders. So x and y are essentially just placeholders, and in Python we call them parameters. And that's why you use x and y throughout your entire code when you're defining a function, because when you're defining a function, you only define the function in terms of its parameters. You can't use like anything outside. But when I'm calling the function, right? Like when I'm calling the function, I want to say, okay, a is the first value and b is the second value. So when I'm actually putting in the parameters, I say a and then b. But when I'm making it, I'm saying, okay, x is going to be the first value and y is going to be the second value, and they can be whatever right now. But That's what I mean. That's what I'm gonna assume. And then when I call it, I can say A and B. That makes sense. Yeah. I saw that you sent. I got it. So I think that makes sense. And then if I were going back to the question, if I were to input 2 and then 1, then what do you guys think would the program output? Alright, so Robert, I think is not sure. Greater than the 2 is 2, yeah. So Robert, it would output 2 because, ooh, okay, so because what would happen is that it would input the first number, and then that first number would be 2, and it would take the input of the second number, and that second number would be 1, and then you would set the answer equal to the greater of the 2, and in this case it would be greater of 2 comma 1, and if we go over here, we check is 2 greater than 1, and since 2 is greater than 1, we go to this statement, and this statement returns the greater number, which returns the first number, which is 2. So after it returns the first number, we go back here, and we say answer is equal to the first number, and which in this case is A, and A is 2. So answer is equal to 2, and the prints greater number of 2 is 2. So do you get like why it prints 2? Like why it prints greater number of the 2 is 2, or like not? You don't. You got it? Okay. So yeah, it prints greater number of the 2 is 2, and yeah. I should save this. There we go. So yeah. So now let's talk about for loops, right? And for loops, they can like repeat the execution of the code multiple times, right? But you can also like change what code happens if you use like a value when you're using your for loop. So this may seem like kind of like what is he talking about right now? It may seem kind of confusing right now, but as I explain it, I hope that it will make more sense. And if you guys have any questions, just feel free to ask them. So the way that you like define a for loop is you're gonna say for a variable name in a range, and then in a number less than, right? And this is like when you want to do it like a certain number of times. So like for example, if you want to do it 10 times, then what you would do is that you just call a variable name x, for example. There we go, that's an x. And then if you want to do it 10 times, then you would put 10, right? And there's a parenthesis, so you'd put 10 inside of the parentheses. And then what would happen is that inside of your for loop, I think you also have this colon, I think. I'll have to double check, but I'm pretty sure you have to also have a colon. And what happens is that it'll iterate through this indented code multiple times, right? It'll iterate through the code 10 times, and but instead of going like x equals 1, x equals 2, x equals 3, all the way to x equals 10, it will go x equals 0, x equals 1, x equals 2, all the way to x equals 10. So for example, if you wanted to print all the numbers from 1 to 10 using a for loop, then you would print for x in range 10, print x plus 1, because x is 0 when you want it to be 1. Now, there's also other ways that we can use numbers, right? And we can have for variable name in range, first value, and the number less than. So it's basically like a range of numbers, like for example, like from 5 to 7, except you don't include the 7. And then the rule of thumb, if this is A and this is B, the number of times that this loop is going to execute is just B minus A. And it will go like, for example, if A is equal to 5 and b is equal to 7, and if your variable name in this case is x again, then in the first iteration, x will be 5, and in the second iteration, x will be 6. And then when x reaches 7, it's like the Python's like, oh no, 7 is not less than 7, so I can't continue doing the loop, and then it stops doing the loop. And also 7 minus 5 is 2, and it executed once for x equals 5 and once for x equals 6, so I executed 2 times. So this is a way to like figure out how many times a loop will execute. Yeah. And the third type of loop that we have is that we have a variable name x, right, for example, and then we can have first value a and second value b, and then a step, I'm just going to call it s, right? And now the way that we're going to figure out how many times, actually, this is kind of complicated, but you have to do like math to figure out how many times this loop will execute, because what this step is, it's just basically like how many times you're going to increment, like how much are going to increment it by, right? So in these first 2 examples, we'd start off at a value, and the next value would just be 1 after it, right? But in this case, your step, it can be like any number, right? It can be any integer. So you can have you can start off with like 1, for example, if you wanted to go from 1 to 9, except you only wanted to do odd numbers, then you would do a equals 1, b equals 9, and then your step would be 2, so that you start off with going 1, and then you do 1 plus 2, which is 3, and then you do 3 plus 2, which is 5, and then you do 5 plus 2, which is 7, and then you do 7 plus 2, which is 9, and then you're like, and then Python's like, oh no, if I do 9 is not less than 9, so I gotta exit the loop. Does it make sense? Does it make sense, like how these like numbers, for loops with numbers work? Yeah, okay, Robert says it makes sense. Wait, I thought it won't go to 9. Yeah, it won't go to 9. Um, I said 1 to 9. I meant like not 9, but if you wanted it to go to 9 with b equals 9, then you could just do 10 or 11 or something, and then that would work out. But yeah, I meant not 9. Like I meant like excluding 9. So I'm sorry if I confused you there, but I hope it makes sense now, and I think it does because you reacted thumbs up. So I will continue. So this is an example of like for loops with numbers, right? And this is like the exact example that I gave before, where if you want to print the numbers from 0 to 9, then you would do this, right? And the reason that this will work, like the reason that it would do 0 to 9 is because it starts counting from 0. And in this case, like index, so this is the 4, right? That's the 4 for the for loop. This is our variable name. That's the in range, and that's our number. So I'm just going to say n for number and v for variable. So it starts off at 0 for this one, for this type of for loop. It starts off at 0, and then it goes all the way until it's less than 10, which in this case is 9. And then the other one, it'll go from, so this is our variable again. I'm not going to do an arrow. I'm just going to do a v, and then this is a, and this is b. Okay, that's not a good b. Let's make this nicer. So this is a, and that's b, and those are decently better a's and b's. So it goes through every index or every item and prints the item or index. So it goes through, okay, so it goes through, so index is just a variable name. You could have the exact same output if you said x, right? And we will get to lists. I think that's where you're going with your message of how you can use for loops with lists. So we will get to that in this class. But this is just for numbers, and it will just say go from every number from the starting number to the ending number, not including the ending number. Yeah, yeah, okay. So this one, so wait, how many times do you guys think this second loop will execute? Yeah, yeah, okay. You were going to which list? Okay. So yeah, after we talk about numbers, we're gonna talk about going through for loops with lists. 10 times, yeah. So 20 minus 10 is 10, and the loop executes 10 times. And it'll print everything from 10 to 19 because it has to be less than 20. And then for the third example, we have, this is our variable, this is A, this is B, and this is S, right? And the way that this one works is it goes from 10, and then 10 plus 2 is 12, 12 plus 2 is 14, 14 plus 2 is 16, 16 plus 2 is 18, 18 plus 2 is 20, oh no, I reached my limit. So it doesn't do 20, and it goes from 10 to 18. Does that make sense? Does like everything on this slide with like how the for loops work? Okay, it all makes sense. Okay, that's great. And see how it will work in code. You have this, and I just have 3 different sections for all 3 of the code segments, and then it prints everything from 0 to 9. And then for this one, it will print everything from 10 to 19. And for this one, it will print everything from 10 to 18. 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. So, as Ariz was talking about, this is for loops with lists, and it repeats the execution of their code for all of the values in the list, right? So what you would do in this case is that you would have a for variable name in lists, and then in your list, and then it would do like, for example, if you had a list, my list, going back to the one that they had all the way back on the recap, you would just do it like this, right? And then let's say your variable name was x. Then what would happen is I would go from x would refer to the first element in the list, and then second one, and then the third one, and then so on and so forth. So that's how like it would work. And for an example, this is probably going to make a lot more sense with an example. So I have a list. Let's look at this first one over here. This one, right? So I have a list of friends: John, Dylan, Lisa, and Christopher. And I have a variable I, which is equal to 0. So over here, what I do is for f in friends, right? And what f is referring to is f is referring to an element in the list. So what will happen is that at the start of the list, it will increment I. Now I is now equal to I plus 1. So I, after the first iteration, I will be equal to 1. And it will print string of I, which is 1. And it will do dot, and it will print the friend, which in this case is John. So what it'll do is it'll print 1 John, 2 Dylan, 3 Lisa, and 4 Christopher. If I were to run the code, that's exactly what happens. 1 John, 2 Dylan, 3 Lisa, and 4 Christopher. And that's because the F, it starts off with being John, the next time it's Dylan, and the time after that is Lisa, and then the final time is Christopher. So that's why I can use the same variable F, and it'll print all four of these different names. So does that make sense? Can't you use enumerate? You could, I think, but I'll have to look into that. And maybe we can talk about that sometime in the future. But right now, you would just use like friends. You just use like this for f in if you do the index and the item. Well, like if you wanted the index and the item, then you could also just do like you can do accounting and you could just do like for one in list.length and you could just refer to the element that you want by doing friends of element and then if you also wanted to you could use the index function. So there's like lots of different ways to choose like which to find the index and the number at the same time. But this is just the one that I chose to do. But and your choice can be arbitrary. It's just like whatever you like to do. But this is like nice and simple. I like to keep it nice and simple. So yeah, it's easy to explain nice and simple. Robert, does this like make sense to you? Like how this all works? It does? Okay. That's great. So this is another one that I have, right? And this is what I was getting to, right? Um, we have so we don't even need this I over here. This is not needed. And you can do for f in range of friends, right? So range of length of friends. So that's a mouthful. Range of length of friends. So what does that mean? Right? So first, whenever you see like lots of parentheses like this, I think like something that I would recommend doing is starting off with the inner one, right? So start with friends. Okay, that's just friends. That's just the list. Okay, so now let's move one step outward. So it says len. So len of friends. Right, so what is len of friends? What do you in this case, what do you guys think len of friends is? 3. Okay, Ari says 3. Robert, what do you think? Okay, Ari's changed his answer to 4. Um, Robert, do you have something to say or you're not sure? Okay. Wait, that's what that expression means, right? It means that you're not sure, or because I don't want to misunderstand you. So the len function basically just counts how many elements are in the list. So it's 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So does that make sense, Robert? On like why it's 4? Yes. Okay. And then so basically for f in range 4, right? And f is just a number, so it'll go from 0 to 3. And then what it'll do is it'll print string of f plus 1. So when f is 0, it'll print 1. When f is 1, it'll print 2. And all the way until 4. And then friends of f, well that's just the first friend, second friend, third friend, fourth friend. So it would have the exact same output, or again, except there's space. It would have the exact same output as this first code segment because it's just a different way to do it, but they both use like for loops, and one uses for loops with lists, while the other one just uses for loops with numbers. So do like for loops in general like make sense to everybody, or does like anyone have any questions? So a bit more confusing. What do you mean like there's something that's like not clear, or which which was a bit more confusing, like the second example, or like for loops in general? Oh, okay, yeah. as you like get used to writing more code, then you like understand more like how it works. You'll understand it more quickly. But if you understand it now, then I think it's all good. Right? You understand it now, right? Okay. Yeah. So here's like a sample exercise. Um, and there's like lots of ways to do this. So let's see. How much time do we have 8 minutes. Okay, so we can do this one exercise. So this is a function to get. So I want you guys to like try to write a function that gets the maximum of 3 numbers inputted by a user. And I'll give you guys like around like I think like 5 minutes should be good. When you guys are done, you guys can just like let me know. So if you finish faster, then we can obviously talk about the solution early. And if you guys have any questions at all, then like yeah, you guys can ask them. But yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah, you don't have to ask for that. You can just go whenever. Just let me know when you're back. Okay. Um, the class ends in under a minute, so I'll talk about the solution next class, and also um, there's two other problems for homework, which is like this one and this one. I'll send them in the email for this week. If you guys have any questions regarding the problems, you guys can ask me. Thank you guys for joining the class. Um, I'll send a email for the recording and all, and then I'll also, um, you're welcome, and I'll also send the link to the next class. The next class will take place same day, same time, Sunday, 10 o'clock a.m. CT, and thank you guys for joining the class. Yeah.